Let's record. Okay, so we should be recording now, and hopefully we have lots of you all joined in. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining me from all around the world for my talk on Chardonnay. My name is Lydia Harrison. I became a Master of Wine last year, right at the end of August. I got the call to third pass, so I've had a very busy few months since, lots of celebrations, etc. And yes, this is one of my favorite grape varieties. I'm not just saying that. I genuinely, in the final paper of my 4 days of hell, really, doing all the exams for the MW, one of the questions was if you could save some grape varieties. You could only pick 2 to save if they all, if vines were going extinct. And I chose Chardonnay because I absolutely love it. So hopefully you will feel some of that passion for the grape variety this evening. I'm an educator at the WSET School in London, so obviously we're hosting all these seminars for you just to keep people entertained, to hopefully bring you some wine education during this strange time. Well, you can see our details at the end, but obviously there's a school Instagram. If you'd like to sort of comment or anything on there, you can. Or my own personal Instagram is Lydia Harrison MW. You can say hello on that if you'd like as well. But please let us know if you enjoy it on the school account. Okay, obviously as well, I can't cover every single Chardonnay producer or region this evening. We only have an hour. So someone please stop drawing on my screen. I can see these crazy annotations coming up. Let me just clear that up. There we go. Okay. But yes, as I was saying, I can't cover everything. Apologies if you ask a question and I don't know that particular region or winemaker or producer. There's hundreds, thousands, I'm sure, making Chardonnay out there. But what I want to do is talk to you about some of the key characteristics of the grape variety, why it's so interesting, or I think it's so interesting. And then we're going to look at some of those key areas. I'm going to choose some where I've been to, but also quite different styles of Chardonnay, just to kind of show you some of the variety it can produce, and some of the places where Chardonnay is the biggest or only grape grown as well. But obviously there's lots of areas to look at. So equally, please pop some questions in the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on it, but if not, my colleague Julia will keep an eye on and can repeat any at the end if I miss them, because I'm not quite so good at doing everything at once. Okay, right, let me move on. Right, here we go. So this is the first slide, just looking a little bit about the history of Chardonnay. This is a lovely picture that I took myself in Chablis, actually, of Domaine Languedoc-Pâquis, which is a property of Bichot. And just, I thought, kind of showed the grandeur or some of the history of it. And obviously Romans, brought the vines through to France, and then the Cistercian monks, particularly in Chardonnay, were really important for, growing Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, obviously, and developing the best sites and the best vineyards for it. But it's really interesting to note that until relatively recently, there wasn't really much Chardonnay outside of Champagne and Burgundy. That was really the home of this grape. That was what you'd see on the label, the regions, the villages of Burgundy. And that was what was more known more widely around the world. They were the brand names. And then it's actually only been relatively recently in wine terms that it's sort of exploded onto the global scene. And if you think about some of the countries where Chardonnay's grown, New Zealand only really had commercial vineyards from the kind of 1980s, really. Even some of the parts of, Australia that we're going to look at, and sort of Yarra, it's only really in the kind of last 50 years that viticulture there has really blossomed, and Chardonnay has suddenly, is so widely spread. So it's really sort of more recent phenomenon that this grape variety has just kind of, exploded in popularity around the world, exploded in terms of vineyard area planted. And part of that came in with obviously all these new commercial vineyards in the New World. And what they did was put the grape variety on the label. So much more simple, isn't it? Rather than learning the 600 appellations of Burgundy, it just tells you California Chardonnay or Yarra Valley Chardonnay. So people then began to know the grape variety. And even now, you start to see it on some Bourgogne wines, usually more the regional level, like Macon or Bourgogne will actually put Chardonnay on the label because they want consumers that perhaps don't know that that is what the grape variety they have in that region. They want to gain some popularity from the fact that, you know, Chardonnay is such a well-known variety now. And it was because people started putting it on the label, and there was explosion in plantings in the New World that people are now, you know, so familiar with it. It's such a household name. Obviously plantings boomed in the 1990s. It became the most planted grape variety in Australia and California. Obviously there has been some sort of slight decrease since that, because it's always like supply and demand and sort of going oversupply, and then there's a shortage, and then etc. And obviously you can't just replant vines very quickly. But it's now sort of at steady levels, and it is now the most widely distributed variety in the world. Not most widely planted. There is more hectarage of some grape varieties like Trebbiano in Italy or Eren in Spain. But in terms of kind of how widely planted it is across the globe, and as you saw by all the different Chardonnays you're drinking tonight from all around the globe, it's definitely the most widely distributed white grape. And the other thing that I think's incredible with Chardonnay is it just kind of, because it can change its style, it warrants these different changes of fashion. Equally so, the winemaking has changed quite a bit. In the 90s, it was known for being these really kind of ripe, heavily oaked styles. Now it's kind of swung back a little bit, and people are going less oak and kind of leaner styles in some places. Equally, it can fall out of fashion. I'm not sure if anyone, obviously no one here, but you might have heard the term ABC, anything but Chardonnay, and a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people will go for a Sauvignon Blanc perhaps, or a Pinot Grigio. But I think that's unfair, because a lot of people will say, and you probably heard the classic line, you know, I don't like Chardonnay, but I like Chablis. And it's just because they would associate Chardonnay and that grape with a particular style, perhaps a heavily oaked style, whereas obviously you can also make champagne. You can also have a Chablis style wine from Chardonnay. So it's so versatile, and therefore because of that it's able to kind of weather these changes of fashion, but also adapt to it as well. And you can change the winemaking, change the picking, or whatever you want to make completely different styles of wine. Okay. So that's just a little bit about the kind of recent explosion in popularity. Now we're going to have a little look at some of the characteristics of the grape. And the reason why it is so widely planted basically is because it will grow practically anywhere. You can have vineyards. Chardonnay is so versatile. It is early budding. And that can be a problem, particularly in your cooler climate regions. Okay, so when we go to look at Chablis, for example, that is a real risk there. It's a real risk in Champagne. It's a real risk in the UK for our sparkling wines. Okay, but it's kind of worth the risk, because obviously when you try these wines, they make some fabulous wines. So obviously, but safer in warmer places where they don't have the risk of spring frost, because it will bud early, just after Pinot Noir. And then it's going to ripen early. So actually you can ripen Chardonnay in any climate. It is sufficient to ripen in kind of continental inland areas that have shorter growing seasons and cooler temperatures if it's a cooler climate. But equally it can ripen in a very warm climate, and you'll just pick it relatively early. So that's also quite good if you're growing lots of different grape varieties, as you spread out the time that you're trying to harvest all your grapes. So this can be one of the first things that you bring into the winery. It's a descendant of Pinot Noir and Gouais Blanc, so they worked out, they did some DNA testing of where it derives from. Gouais Blanc not so obviously well known now, but obviously you all attended Julia's Pinot Noir seminar, hopefully, so hopefully you learnt all about that then. The other good thing about Chardonnay, and another reason why it's so widely grown, is that it gives you pretty good yields. It can be quite high yielding, but it can still retain some quality with that. unlike kind of Pinot Noir, which is really fickle. So you can use it for these just, you know, really easy drinking, relatively high yielding wines that are just, you know, everyday drinking, like just a basic Californian Chardonnay or an easy drinking Macron style. So it gives you return on investment as well. It's going to give you sufficient yield or volume. Equally, you can restrict those yields and only get a tiny crop and make some of the most, you know, sought after, really high quality wines as well. So really versatile in terms of volumes and production ranges as well. And it will grow on kind of any soil as well. We're going to look at some of the key soils. It does particularly well on limestone, for example, but equally on clay, on sand. You can find it on lots of different soil types and all the different climates, from cool Champagne, as we said, to really hot parts of inland California. So you can pretty much grow this grape variety wherever you can have a vineyard. So that makes it really easy. And another reason why it's so widely grown, you can put it on any soil, ripen in any climate. You can make different quality levels, and you can also make different styles. And we will talk about those as we go through as well. Acidity I've put, because again, that would depend on the climate, okay? But obviously if you're in a cooler climate or moderate climate, it tends to retain that acidity and give you nice and high acid wines with lovely freshness. If it is hot though, towards the end of its ripeness, it does tend to lose that acidity relatively quickly. So obviously that's why winemakers can acidify. They could add some acid to kind of offset that. Or equally, you can decide when you want to pick as well to preserve some of that acidity. It's a non-aromatic grape variety. So I always think wine lovers kind of fall into two camps, whether you love Riesling on the one hand or whether you love Chardonnay. Maybe that's not true. I do still enjoy Riesling, but if I had to choose, you know, one white grape variety for my desert island, it would be Chardonnay. I'm hoping some of you are with me here. But yes, it's a non-aromatic grape variety. So it's not particularly perfumed, but that's what, for me, what makes it interesting. It has a lot of fruit character, but it also will take on all of these other winemaking techniques that you can throw at it. So everything from, you know, we'll look through the winemaking techniques. So it's really malleable. It's basically a winemaker's dream. And that's almost the kind of, you know, rite of passage to produce a great Chardonnay in your region. And it's the one that winemakers can really have fun with and experiment and shape the style of the wine that they want to create. I'm sorry if some of you are having trouble hearing. I am speaking very close to my laptop. I'm hoping some of you can hear me okay. But yes, it's also like Pinot Noir that Julia looked at a couple of weeks ago. It also can express its place as well as the winemaking techniques. So it will adjust to climate and soil and give you quite different flavors and characteristics as well. And the other thing, obviously, perhaps not as long as aged as some of your top Rieslings, but it can also, obviously, your top quality Chardonnays can age really, really well and develop those lovely kind of tertiary, nutty, sort of almost sort of malt biscuits, oatmeal, honey characteristics with age as well. So really, really versatile. And we'll just have a quick look. My next couple of slides just show what you can sort of, some of the flavors you can get with Chardonnay. And again, you can see a real range on my sort of flavor scale here, from green fruits to tropical. Just clear that off. There we go. And again, obviously, this is going to depend on what climate you're growing your Chardonnay in, but also at what stage you pick as well, at how ripe those grapes are. And it can have everything from these very kind of lean citrus, green fruit, green pear, grapefruit, lemon juice kind of character, more to sort of lemon peach in more moderate climates usually. And then warmer places or where you can have a long hang time of your Chardonnay grapes. So particularly in kind of warm climates where you can leave the grapes on the vine. You can even get these sort of melon, pineapple, tropical. So a range of flavors. usually linked to obviously how warm it is, picking stage climate, but also from different clones as well. And there's lots of different clones. Some of the Burgundy, or also known as Dijon clones, are very widely grown. Equally, there's the Mendoza clone, which if you look at Jancis Robinson's book, she's quite dismissive about it and says it's not good quality. But I've met lots of New World producers that say they have some Mendoza clone and they highly recommend it. Some say it gives tropical fruit, some say it gives a more linear style. There's difference of opinions. And then there's others like the Gingin clone, which is what Lewin Estate famously use in Margaret River in Western Australia. So I'm not going to get into too much detail into clones. There's loads of different numbers and they're often confusingly called different things in different places. But it's just another of those complexity things why Chardonnay can taste different, or different vineyards next door might taste different. It might be the clone, it could be the soil, it could be the winemaking, it could be the picking time. There's so many variables. Not wine grapes, no, it's the Oxford Companion, but I'm sure she has some more information in wine grapes as well. Yes, well, I'm just looking back at a couple of questions. Aromatic is more those really perfumed grape varieties like Gewürztraminer Riesling. Chardonnay is non-aromatic. It doesn't have that really perfumed fruit character. Okay, I'm going to have to catch up with any other questions at the end. Julia can remind me. All right, and then if the next slide is obviously how you can shape Chardonnay. So this is one of the key things with this grape variety is, or why, you know, Chardonnays from all over the world can taste completely different. Even Chardonnays within France can taste so different. It's to do with what the winemaker does. And you have so many choices with winemaking. One of the key things is your fermentation temperature. So you could easily just do a temperature controlled, relatively cool fermentation with Chardonnay, and it would preserve a lot of the kind of aromas, that sort of apple or peach, depending on how ripe your grapes are. And you could then do some inert vessels and stainless steel and just have a very sort of slightly fruity, easy drinking white wine. Equally, if you're going to ferment in barrel, for example, those temperatures are naturally going to get higher. They're going to creep up and you're going to have a warmer fermentation because you're not controlling the temperature in a barrel. And so it maybe is more like sort of 18 degrees, 20 degrees. And that's going to burn off some of the more delicate aromas, but you can get some real savory characters, as well as the oxygen impact of that. So obviously that's the very first thing, is if you're going to control the fermentation of the temperature, and even just, you know, using particular yeast strains can release different flavors from your grape. Malolactic conversion, or you might have heard it called malolactic fermentation, obviously is another thing that can really influence the flavor of your Chardonnay. And this will can add flavors, what we call dairy kind of flavor characteristics. So things like yogurt, cream, butter are flavors that we attribute to malolactic conversion, but it's also is a process that softens the acidity. So again, this is why you can have so many different styles of Chardonnay, whether you block malolactic and leave this really sort of high racy acidity, whether you will bring it down and it can still be high in cool climates. So for example, in Chablis, malolactic conversion is undergone 100% because you've got such high acidity and they want to soften it a little bit. The same with sparkling wine in Champagne or the UK. But if you're somewhere really warm, maybe you are going to prevent this because you want to keep some freshness, or perhaps you want to make a really creamy soft style and you will still let this happen in a warm climate. Okay, so you can change the kind of perception or the mouthfeel of the acidity and the flavors along with that if you want to, or not, or you could do partial. Okay, so many choices with Chardonnay. Another key consideration is your lees aging. So this is aging the wine on the dead yeast cells. We often tend to think of that as happening in barrel, and often they will, you know, happen. Maybe you're leaving the wine to mature in oak, and the fine lees are in there as well. But equally, you could do this in tank. Equally, this happens in bottle. Okay, if you think about your bottle fermented sparkling wines like champagne, you're aging the wine on the lees, and Chardonnay has this great ability to absorb these yeast characteristics, that bready, biscuity, toasty, pastry kind of flavors that you get, and it really takes these on quite strongly, a lot better than other grape varieties, which is why it's so suited to making sparkling wine. You can use inert vessels, so as you said, you don't have to let any flavors impart on your Chardonnay, or you can do the complete opposite and really add flavors through the use of oak as well. But again, so many decisions to be made with Chardonnay and oak. What kind of oak are you using? Are you using chips or staves? Okay, and these will add flavors very quickly because you've got a lot of surface area of the wine to wood. And you can easily add some quite sort of vanilla hints or smoky flavors. Barrels, and again, numerous differences, numerous kind of options here that are going to impact on the flavor. What about the origin of the oak? Okay, French oak will tend to give you a more kind of cedary, toasty character because it has a tighter grain, a different origin, to American oak that tends to give you a sweeter profile, more kind of coconut, vanilla flavor characteristics. Okay. Have any other woods other than oak? Yes. Oak is the most common, mainly because it has the ability to A, give good flavors, okay, B, allow oxygen in, but keep liquids in as well, okay, so oxygen can transfer but liquids won't fall out. But there are some others. Cherry wood has been used, particularly in the Veneto, sort of Amarone. Acacia wood is sometimes used. But yeah, oak is still by far the most typical wood to be used. Yes, you can. It's just usually the benefits of using barrel is not just that you get flavors, okay, but you also get oxygen transfer. So it's also going to evolve the flavors of your wine to some of those more kind of savory, nutty characters. So usually if you're making premium Chardonnay, you would tend to use a barrel. But you can still get, if you've got good quality fruit and you want some oak characters, you can still make good Chardonnay by using chips. I'm just going back to oak. I was talking about the different origins. So obviously you've got American, French, and even you can drill it down into the different types of French forest and they'll give you slightly different flavors. But equally, the age of the wood will also have a massive impact, and you can vary that. You can it's quite common to use some new, some 1-year-old, some 2-year-old wood. The time, so obviously how long you leave the wine in the oak barrel. I forgot to write size in here. How big the barrel is. A small barrique is going to give you a much more impact than a large one. And then the toast as well. So obviously to make a barrel, you have to heat the wood to bend it into staves. And if you do a high toast, that will often give you a quite sort of really almost caramel, strongly sort of smoky vanilla. If it's a more delicate toast, that impact and flavor will be more subtle. So many variables with wood. So you can see why winemakers really love to play with this grape variety. They can really shape it. They can make completely different wines depending on all these decisions that they make up. Okay. All right. And then the other thing is obviously the types of wines. So I'm going to focus mainly on still white wines this evening, but obviously you can make sparkling wines from Chardonnay. You can make it from blends, so very typically Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Meunier, or your champagne varietals. Equally, you could have blends of Chardonnay, Chenin Blanc in South Africa, okay, different, or Chardonnay and Malzac if you're looking at Crémant de Limoux in France. So very versatile. Equally, you could have 100% Chardonnay wines like your Blanc de Blanc champagne. It's permitted in the Carvadio now. It's used in English sparkling. So such a versatile grape. And the reason it is used usually for these traditional methods sparkling wines is it just gives you these lovely, takes on those autolytic flavors really, really well. Equally, you can just make your easy drinking wines. So one of the reasons why it's so popular, a bit like, you know, Pinot Grigio, is just if you just want an easy drinking wine, not expensive, a little bit of fruit, kind of nice round mouthfeel, you can buy a Chardonnay, easy drinking, inexpensive, okay? Or, and again, you could have that as a single varietal, or you could blend it with what other local grapes you have, maybe Semillon if you were in some parts of Australia, or Colombard, or Catarratto in Sicily, in southern Italy, okay? You can mix it with whatever you like. Or you've got your more complex wines. And again, that doesn't mean they have to be oaked. If you think about some top Chablis, it's not necessarily using new oak. They use some very old oak. It's more for oxygen than flavors. But just such a range of different premium wines. And someone, I think, asked earlier, what makes a wine suitable for aging? And that's when you have real flavor concentration, okay? It doesn't have to just have oak or acid, but it needs to have really good flavor concentration. And those flavors will then, flavors that will evolve positively, okay, over time in bottle. Then obviously it will be supported by acidity or tannins or sugar or whatever else. So you really need, you know, flavor concentration. And then you can add to that if you want with oak and some of those winemaking techniques as well. Definitely, yes, French oak is definitely more expensive. Sweet wines, we're not really going to talk about these too much, but it is possible just to know they exist. You can, sometimes it's a relatively thin grape, Chardonnay, so it is susceptible to botrytis in some regions. It is possible to find some botrytized wines in parts of Burgundy, even in New Zealand. They've experimented in a few other places as well. So seek those out as well. Even ice wine, there you go. So pretty versatile. Right, we're going to get on to the regions now, as we're already halfway through. So as I say, we're not going everywhere. We'd never finish. I'm just going to highlight some of the places I've been and wine styles that I love, but there's so many. And obviously, you know, you can literally grow Chardonnay anywhere. So Canada and the US up here, South America, Argentina, Chile, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, going back to the Northern Hemisphere, loads of Europe. It's not as widely grown in Spain, but it does feature there. As I said, it's permitted in Cava now, the UK, France, obviously the most widely planted white grape. Italy, even particularly in the north, in Trentino, they make a lot of sparkling wine. Also up in Alto Adige and Friuli, down in the south as well. Even a little bit in Germany, reluctantly, and they were sort of one of the last places to adopt it. But yeah, French Quarter too, yeah, absolutely. So there's so many places. It will literally grow anywhere you can make wine. But we're going to zoom in and just obviously highlight France Festival, because obviously throughout France, in all of your different climates, from the north here up in Champagne, where it's really cool, down through, obviously this is Chablis here, this little orange dot, the rest of Burgundy we're going to look at, to the Van de Pey Dock down here in the south, you have Chardonnay. And it features in every region. You still have it in the Loire. You can find it in some of the regions sort of up towards the Alps. But, you know, and just even within France, within one country, you can get all the different styles, from sparkling to, you know, big oaky versions, to riper, more tropical from down here in the south. So there's so much versatility just within one country. And we're going to start off by looking at one of my favorite regions, which is Chablis. And the reason I love this is I just think it's such a individual style of Chardonnay. It's quite hard to find wines from other places that taste quite like Chablis. I used to love it when it came up in blind tasting, because I could pick it out if it's particularly kind of true to form. It's a very cool climate. Obviously, you saw in that previous slide, the Chablis vineyards are really close to Champagne, okay? So it's going to give you that really kind of appley, steely citrus character, high acid wines. It's 100% Chardonnay. It's an appellation purely for Chardonnay. So always white, always Chardonnay. That's the simple bit. And it's grown here specifically on this type of limestone soil. Sometimes it's called Kimmeridgian clay. There is some clay in it, but it has a lot of limestone. And the Kimmeridgian clay, which is in the better areas, also contains these little fossils, these little oyster shells, which is really, really interesting. And limestone's great for Chardonnay because it's quite a cool soil. It's white, so it reflects heat, and that will slow the ripening. So it allows the grapes to build up flavour. The AOCs in Chablis were established in 1938. There's a little bit of facts and figures for you there that I found out. But obviously the key thing here is you obviously have the region on the name, and then you have 4 clear distinct appellations for sort of how good your Chablis is. Petit Chablis is it planted on some of the not best sites, and on some of the Portlandian clay, which isn't as good. Chablis, then you have your Premier Cru vineyards and your Grand Cru vineyards. I don't have time to explain all the intricacies of the Burgundy appellation system, but I just thought I'd highlight some of the different labels that you will see there from Chablis. But the reason this makes such a distinct style is the cool climate, okay, as I was saying, giving you that really particular high acidity, the really citrusy fruit flavours of Chardonnay. So very kind of tart, sort of green apple, green pear, grapefruit, lemon juice, okay. So this sort of really lean style, that really high acidity. So it's a very sort of less ripe style of Chardonnay than you'd often find in warmer climates. And the soil obviously contributes to that. Someone's asked, is it also called? Yes, it was. Kimmeridgian and Portland both contain limestone. Portlandian actually more, whereas the Kimmeridgian has more of the oyster shells. All right. Just going on here, you can see, hopefully here, you can see here in this picture, this is me standing on the Grand Cru vineyard. If I point out in the map, I'm sort of somewhere around here between Le Presse and Vaudésire. There's what's known as the 8th Chablis Grand Cru vineyard. Now, you might say there's only 7, and technically there is, as you can see here, this one Grand Cru vineyard stretches all the way here, that has the best sites for ripening your Chardonnay here. Nice steep slopes to avoid the frost risk that we talked about in a cool climate, good exposure to sunlight and warmth, and also you've got the river here. But even within these Grand Cru sites, you can see there's completely different exposures and expositions of the vineyards depending where you are. And actually there's one little plot called La Mouton, which I've lost my arrow, kind of sits here mainly on Vaudésire but onto Le Presse. So it's known as the unofficial 8th Grand Cru of Chablis. But these are the 7 different climats that you can see on labels. And you can see here the steepness. I was out of breath walking up this vineyard here. And you can also see the soil type, and I'm holding a sort of fossil, oyster shell fossil. So this really white, rocky, well-drained soil, the slope as well, the cold air is going to sink down, so you avoid the frost risk here. But equally, because the vines here are so valuable and they can get so much more money for Chablis Grand Cru, this particular vineyard actually has some wires, some electrical wires on the vines, so if frost was an issue, they could heat them up and prevent the frost from forming. Yeah, pretty much you can drive around the vineyards of Chablis if you'd like to. Obviously, if you want to speak to a particular producer, phone them up or make an appointment. They always are more welcoming if you do that. But then, yeah, they're very open to visits. No, you cannot. You wouldn't be able to mechanical harvest on this steep slope here. But some of the flatter sites, you might be able to. And someone's asked, how long can you keep a Chablis Premier Cru? It really depends. But if it's a good vintage, definitely a decade or so. People tend to drink it younger. They like the freshness, and you definitely can. But particularly some of the top, more like the sort of Grand Crus or a really good Premier Cru from some of the top producers can easily age a decade or more. And they, develop these lovely sort of oatmeal-y, biscuity, sort of citrus peel flavour characteristics. And yeah, the other reason why I love Chablis is just the variety of it. So even within the Grand Cru vineyards, okay, if you're looking at here, Where's my arrow gone? Here we go. Le Clos, this is the sort of warmest. You're facing almost due south. Lovely sun exposure all day and can be some of the richest styles of Chablis. Whereas Blanchot here, just next door, but on this side it is a little bit in the shade. There's another hill here, so it's sort of in the shade until a little bit later, so it does a kind of much more leaner style. And I just love those flavors you get in Chablis, the citrusy fruit, the green fruits, that kind of stony, steely character that people talk about. And the malolactic here, I always think is quite different to other places. I tend to get more yogurt character. It's more like fresh, natural yogurt rather than butters and cream. You know, butter and cream, it's the kind of more yogurt character. And then with age, this lovely sort of oatmeal notes. So yes, that's Chablis. I probably need to move on if I'm talking about Chablis. And we're just going to go a little bit further south to the Côte d'Or. Obviously not time to go through all of the key regions here. There's tons. But just to highlight, you know, within Burgundy, how Chardonnay can express itself so differently, from Chardonnay up in the north in the cool climate to down here in the Côte de Beaune. Particularly going to highlight Meursault as a kind of contrasting style, but you could look at Pouilly-Fuissé, for example, down in the Mâconnais. Just, you know, completely different. We've got a warmer climate here, more moderate climate. So you tend to have much more stone fruit, peaches, lemons, less of that green fruit character. Still high acidity, but perhaps a little less. And then obviously all of those winemaking techniques they would do here. So you can get a lot of barrel fermentation and barrel maturation, which they can also do on some of your top Chablis, but usually older oak is used. Whereas here, your top wines, definitely your Meursault Premier Crus, are going to go through some new oak to really give a much more kind of impact of vanilla and cloves and toast characteristics. The malolactic can give a kind of creamier texture. You'll probably get more body and alcohol here than in Chablis, more mouthfeel, a kind of broader expression. And then again with bottle age, there's a lovely kind of hazelnuts, rich kind of characteristics. I'm just watching your debates in the chat. Ravenel is one of, yes, a delicious producer, up there with WSET. People will debate those two. Try them out if ever you can. Amazing producers. Yes, I know, supposed to be unbiased, but I'm completely biased. So this is actually time for a drink. If you haven't had one already, Jesus, what have you been doing? But this is what I have. This is actually the picture I took of this barrel when I visited Bichot. This is Meursault. It's a Premier Cru Les Chambres. Obviously, there's lots of other Premier Cru vineyards. And this is 2016 vintage, which is a pretty small vintage. If you follow, they have a lot of issues with hail. There's some terrible frost problems in Burgundy. So it's a tiny crop, but those grapes that they did pick were really concentrated. So it's a beautiful white Burgundy vintage, real flavor concentration. So I'm just going to wet my palate. Hope you're all having a slurp of something with me, even if it's just tea or water. And although it's young, and it could obviously age a lot longer with all this flavor, it is just delicious. I always love the integration in Côte d'Or wines, the top ones, where you can taste everything. Okay, you've got the fruits, that lovely lemon peach character. You've got the winemaking, the malo, the lees, the oak, all kind of happily married together. And then with time as well, some savory, nutty characters coming through as well. Still lovely freshness, even in a warm year, you still have that acidity. And again, not massive alcohol. What are we? 13.5. So obviously it was a warmer vintage, more so than your typical in Chablis, but just a really nice body and mouthfeel as well. As I say, would love to do a tasting, just, you know, comparing all the Grand Cru of the Côte de Beaune, but we haven't got time. But just as a kind of comparison there of Chablis and Meursault, two both top villages in Burgundy, in Bourgogne, I should say, but giving you completely different styles of Chablis just from within one area of France. All right, time to go to the New World, and we're going to go to Australia and then America, so no one can accuse me of bias. We're going global with our tour, 2 different ends of the world. And I first went to Australia for my MW seminar back in 2017 now, towards the end of 17, and it was glorious. It was November. It was a beautiful time to visit, lovely weather. And we did a little bit of a road trip. We stayed in Melbourne, and we did Yarra Valley and Mornington Peninsula, and then carried on driving up to Adelaide through various wine regions. But just to show you where Yarra Valley is, okay, here, that I'm going to focus on. So you're in Victoria, state of Victoria, here near Melbourne. And here's the Yarra Valley. And you can see on this map as well, you can see the end of the, what's it called? Not the Flinders Range, the Great Dividing Range. Sorry, the chat's covering the map. Here, so some of the upper Yarra here, you've really got high altitude, okay? And some down here, it's a lot warmer and flatter. But what you also have is this coastal influence that's really, really important for the vineyards here. So, just moving on. Again, just I highlighted it at the beginning, but really, only really recently that you started to see, you know, real scope in vineyards in the Yarra Valley, and they've just been doing brilliant, more and more better things ever since. It's 27%, so almost a third of the crop is Chardonnay here. Pinot Noir is more popular, but Chardonnay is the most important white grape variety of the region by a mile. There's only about 4% Sauvignon Blanc is the next planted white grape. So Chardonnay really important to the region. And again, even here, it can come in varying styles. We've got what is described as a cool to moderate maritime climate. Now, I will say when I visited, I thought it was far warmer than cool. We were having some glorious weather. It was a lovely sort of early start to the summer. I'd also just got off a flight of 24 hours or whatever. So I was rather jet lagged. And we were standing in the vineyard at kind of midday, and the sun was beating on my head, and I didn't feel very well at all. And I thought, this is not cool climate. And there's lots of Aussies telling you it's cool climate. And I felt like I was about to faint. But obviously it depends where you are. Obviously that was a particularly sunny day. It does cool right down at night here, and that's really, really important for just preserving the acidity in the grapes, giving the vines a chance to reset and then ripen again during the day. So again, your quality Chardonnay here is enabled from that cooling coastal influence, the cooling down at night, some diurnal range, and then also altitude. So the upper Yarra vineyards, as I pointed out, it goes up to 400 meters, and some of them are a bit higher up. Okay, so that's obviously going to make it cooler, and it's not going to be as warm or ripe, and they'll produce often leaner styles of Chardonnay than down in the lower Yarra. So for example, we visited a producer called Mac Forbes. You might know they do some brilliant Chardonnay. One of them was only about 11% alcohol, not what perhaps you associate with that 90s vision of Australian Chardonnay. Very sort of lean, picked early, really citrusy, steely style. Equally, this beautiful picture here is Oak Ridge Estate. I'm sitting, this is sort of where their tasting room is, looking across, got to be some of the most magnificently kept vineyards you've seen, with these beautiful puffy clouds, which is a little bit warmer and a sort of slightly riper style with different winemaking. Okay, so completely different. And then you've got different soils from clay, rock to volcanic, so all contributing different things. And then lastly, just to wrap up, any questions about the Yarra, let me know. But some really good Chardonnays. Oh, and then the other thing I wanted to mention about the Yarra is, winemaking. We talked about fashion earlier, and previously people thought of Australian Chardonnays, a lot of, the big bulk producers and oak chips and quite ripe, heavily oaked wines. There's now a general trend away from that, so people picking a little bit early, keeping that freshness, particularly down here and in Mornington. You're still using oak, but perhaps less new oak, so it's not quite so sort of obvious flavours. And a lot of lees stirring. There's a lot of quite sort of reductive styles where you get that sort of play on just sort of verging on reduction, a little bit kind of struck match, slightly smoky element, which I really like as well. All right, and then lastly, couldn't do a Chardonnay webinar without talking about California. Okay, the Americans absolutely love Chardonnay. It is by far the most planted white grape. I think it still is the most widely planted grape. Cabernet is pushing, but what the last figures I checked, Chardonnay was just ahead, but definitely by far the most planted white grape. Quite different really when you think about perhaps consumer preferences in the UK, you know, where Pinot Grigio and Sauvignon Blanc are racing ahead. You have to have a more global approach, and Chardonnay is consumed really widely in the States. Absolutely love it. It's almost kind of synonymous with white wine. And again, it's grown throughout. So you have everything from your sort of easy drinking quaffers from inland to your really premium, top quality coastal areas. And again, they can come in a whole range of styles. So it is a little bit difficult to generalize, and obviously all those different winemaking options, harvesting options. But generally, because you have such lovely sunshine in California, you know, ripeness is not an issue. It's generally pretty warm. This is a maritime climate. So we've looked at continental climates in Burgundy. We looked at maritime in Yarra. This is Mediterranean, sorry. I think I said maritime. Mediterranean. So lovely dry summers, really warm summers. So, and often they'll leave the Chardonnay to hang, so you get more into some of that tropical fruit spectrum in some of the warmer places and later picked styles. They'll tend to do a lot of mallow. So again, you get that really kind of creamy, buttery characteristics. And again, all those options with oak, lees, stirring, etc. And definitely your premiums, like Napa Valley Chardonnays or Sonoma Chardonnays, are often known for some producer styles as being quite buttery, quite creamy, lactic, oaky. Obviously, if they pick later, it's warmer, a bit more alcohol as well. Really sort of can be quite plush and full-bodied. And I will love all of these different styles of Chardonnay, from the Chablis through sort of the Burgundy to here. And I'm not overgeneralizing. There are some very different styles if you're on the cooler Caneros or coastal sites, or people doing all sorts of different things with their Chardonnay. But just as a kind of what some of the styles you might be familiar with. And this picture here, this is Beringer Estates, which is one of the oldest Napa Valley producers that is settled. Moved over from Germany in the late 1800s, right in the kind of central part of the Napa Valley, still making some amazing Chardonnay. But equally, as we talked about fashion earlier, it's interesting to note that they, you know, openly said when we visited that if they had to replant their Chardonnay vineyard, it would be hard not to replant with Cabernet if you were arguing, because obviously Cabernet in Napa fetches such, you know, much a higher price point. Okay, it can reach, you know, the most coveted crop, whereas Chardonnay is grown everywhere. But they were making a lovely Chardonnay there, that really sort of smooth, creamy Chardonnay from Beringer Estates. And that's not a picture of their vineyards, but just the Rhine house. So going a bit of a nod to their German heritage there. But equally, obviously, you can get sparkling wines up in Anderson Valley. Things like Roeder Estates have their quartet here. You've got loads of producers in Sonoma. Someone's mentioned ABC au Bon Climat, absolutely, down here in Santa Barbara. So, you know, experiment with your Californian Chardonnays as well. There's, you know, so much diversity to be had, from everything from your dark horse Tony up to your, you know, super, super premium, expensive, and everything in between. So there really is, you know, Chardonnay at every price point for everyone. And so, yeah, just to sum up, and then I'll answer all your questions, hopefully, if I have time. It's just, you know, it's huge. this 2015 survey of American wine consumers, and Chardonnay was by far the most popular variety, well ahead of Pinot Grigio. So it might not be necessarily in every country, but as wines go, it's massive. Woodbridge Estate that I visited, one of the big producers in California, they do 10 million cases of Chardonnay a year. This is huge, okay? So people like it. It's just accessible, easily priced, very open, enjoyable styles. Obviously, then you also have your really premium, age-worthy styles. You can buy a Montrachet if you want. You can buy a Chablis Grand Cru, Les Pres, or whatever. You've got everything at every different price point, unoaked to really heavily oaked, everything in between, sparkling wines, even sweet wines. You know, there really is, hopefully, something for everyone, different quality levels, and the ability to adapt the winemaking or the picking to changes in fashion as well. So, you know, that's why I love Chardonnay. I will never grow tired of drinking it. I might have consumed quite a lot since I've been in isolation or lockdown. So yeah, feel free to ping some questions. I'm anything but Sauvignon Blanc. Why do I occasionally get caught out by Chardonnay at study time? That's true. I mean, it could be maybe slightly underripe, or it could just be a specific clone. Remember as well, it could be labelled as Chardonnay, and they can always, if you're in the EU, they could blend in other grapes. 15% could be something else that perhaps has a little bit of a Sauvignon edge to it. Will I ever go off Chardonnay? Hopefully not. No, I don't think so. I still drink. It's not like I only drink Chardonnay. I love all different wines, but I absolutely I don't think you could get bored of it. I'm never tired of champagne. In the off trade, it really depends. I think it depends what the occasion is and what your budget is. So yeah, I don't want to answer that. Sorry, some of the questions flying through a little bit too quickly. Obviously, yeah, my budget's not limitless, but equally sometimes, you know, top wines I think are worth it. Winemaker, vineyard tester. Yeah, I think it's everything with Chardonnay. It's the everything in the vineyard and the choices that you do in the vineyard to, you know, terroir encompassing winemaking, soil, climate of that particular year. It really is so varied. Good value for money when it comes to Chardonnay. Are you looking for a particular recommendation? Oh gosh, there's so many. I would say go to some of the obscure places. Southern France, great for value for money. Southern Italy. You know, some of those places that people just don't know about. Chile's always great value. Some great Argentine wines out there. Best Chardonnay you've ever had? Oh, really tough. I mean, but I would say some Raveneau Chablis definitely amongst one of my favourite bottles I've ever enjoyed in Chablis, with a lobster tasting menu. I mean, what more could you possibly want? I'm not sure about the Pinot Noir webinar. If you just email Julia, she'll be able to help you with that. Oh, nice. Everyone's just sort of showing off now of what they drank. Any questions that I've missed? I do love Chablis. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, I think there's different things that could be out of fashion, but as you say, I mean, a lot of people don't know some wines are Chardonnay, so Burgundy has a benefit in that respect, that people just buy a Mac on, don't necessarily know what it is. I think we're more worried about the younger generation just going off wine at all rather than Chardonnay. I think people will still like it because it doesn't have any really particularly strong flavours that people might not like. You know, it's just very easy and versatile. How do you initiate MLF? Warm conditions, okay, it's a bacteria, so you need sort of some warmth, and don't apply any sulfur, and then the lactic acid bacteria will convert the malic acid into lactic acid. Can we get the Pinot Noir glass again? I'm sorry, no, you have to listen to Chardonnay. No, I'm joking. Email Julia, it's jlambeth@wstglobal.com. Acidity is just naturally in the grapes. So when the grapes are underripe, they're very, very sour. Think about biting into a lemon. That would be like an underripe grape. And then as it ripens, that acidity decreases. Any secret tips? No, just taste lots, Stefan. It's a tough job. Sometimes if there's a lot of oak, it is harder to pick up some fruit underneath. But with practice, and sometimes you taste more than on the nose and vice versa. Okay, yeah, Chablis can be tricky. But I always think actually compared to other parts of Burgundy, it's better priced than some of your, Côte d'Or wines. Limoux Chardonnay. They have some great wines from down there and southern France. It just because Chardonnay doesn't have lots of particularly strong flavours, so it takes on, it absorbs the oak flavours very well, and it just tends to marry very well with a bit of subtle fruit, bit of oak flavours, rather than a grape variety that would have a lot of strong fruit flavours that perhaps then might clash a little bit with the oak. Okay, if I've missed any more questions, wow, I can't actually keep up. Sorry, there's so many, so I'm just going to look out for any messages from Julia, and then I shall answer those. Is Chardonnay blended? Yes, it can be. I talked about some areas where they blend it with like Colombard, Chenin Blanc, etc. But often it's a single varietal. Can you explain the MLV? What happens in Champagne? What do you mean MLV? UK Chardonnay. Bolney Estates do some, and also Chapel Down. That I've tasted. Yes, climate change will. It's why, the UK, for example, can start to produce sparkling wines from Chardonnay, because we can now ripen the grapes. Not every year. 2012, they didn't pick any in a lot of places because it wasn't warm enough. But remember, climate change isn't just about warming temperatures, it's also about unpredictability, and that can be a real danger actually. If there's suddenly hail or really obscure weather conditions, that's a threat as well. Thank you. I'm glad. I hope you're awake now, Crystal. Okay, I think I've answered most of them. Great. They're my slides I put together. I just need to check. But Peter Wagstaff, I'll see if you could send me an email and I'll get back to you. You've got the email in the confirmation. Thank you, everybody. Right, I'm just going to stop recording.